Genesis, the first book of the Bible, a word derived from a Hebrew term, reshit, meaning beginning. While Genesis contains many familiar stories, the best way to understand it is by looking at its structures. The book is divided into two main sections. 1. Chapters 1 to 11 focus on the story of God and the whole world. 2. Chapters 12 to 50 shift to the story of God and Abraham's family. The relationship between these two parts reveals the central message of Genesis. The first part of Genesis begins with the creation story, where God transforms a dark, watery chaos into a beautiful garden where humans can flourish. Throughout this process, God repeatedly declares his creation to be good. This is where the first humans, Adam and Eve, enter the narrative. Their names have significant meanings. Adam represents humanity, and Eve represents life. Created in God's image, humanity is meant to reflect God's creativity, goodness, and character. Their purpose is to cultivate the world by creating cultures, art, and communities. However, God gives them a moral choice symbolized by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God warns them not to eat from this tree, as doing so would lead to death. Up to this point, God alone has defined what is good. The tree represents a choice. Will humanity trust God's definition of good and evil, or will they seize the opportunity to define it for themselves? Tragically, Adam and Eve disobeyed by eating the fruit. This decision is the Bible's foundational explanation for sin, the human desire to call the shots and prioritize self-interest, even at the expense of others. Humanity's decision to define good and evil apart from God leads to disastrous consequences. Genesis 3:11 traces the downward spiral of humanity. Adam and Eve can no longer trust each other, leading to shame and hiding. The story of Cain and Abel follows, where jealousy drives Cain to murder his brother. Things worsen with Lamech, a descendant of Cain, who treats wives as property and boasts about being more violent and vengeful than Cain. The human race's corruption becomes so severe that God decides to start over. The flood story, often seen as an expression of divine anger, actually begins with God's grief over humanity's state. To preserve the goodness of creation, God washes the world clean with a flood. In this moment of judgment, there's a glimmer of hope. God chooses Noah and his family to reboot humanity, along with pairs of animals to preserve life. However, even this new beginning falters. After the flood, Noah plants a vineyard, becomes drunk, and a troubling incident occurs with one of his sons. Humanity grows again, but the same patterns of rebellion persist. In the story of the Tower of Babel, the nations unite to build a city with a tower reaching the heavens, using the innovation of brickmaking. Their goal is to make a name for themselves, but God intervenes. Knowing this city would lead to oppression and disaster, he scatters the people and confuses their languages. All these stories emphasize the same point. When humans seize autonomy from God and define good for themselves, it leads to tragedy and death. By the end of this section, humanity's future looks bleak. After the scattering at Babel, Genesis introduces a genealogy that leads to a man named Abram, later known as Abraham. God makes extraordinary promises to Abraham to bless him, give him countless descendants, and through his family, bring blessing to all nations. This marks the beginning of God's rescue plan to restore humanity to the goodness of the Garden of Eden and his original intentions for the world. Despite God's promises, Abraham and Sarah struggle with impatience and doubt. Twice, Abraham denies Sarah is his wife to protect himself, and Sarah, unable to wait for God's timing, has Abraham father a child with her servant Hagar, creating tension and conflict in the family. Yet, God miraculously gives them a son, Isaac, in their old age. Isaac marries and has twin sons, Esau and Jacob. While things seem promising, Jacob devises a plan to steal Esau's inheritance, taking advantage of their father Isaac, who is old and blind. Jacob, now estranged from his family, goes on to have 12 sons. However, he favors Joseph, his 11th son, giving him a special coat that sparks jealousy among his brothers. Joseph's brothers plan to kill him, but instead sell him into slavery in Egypt. Despite his suffering, Joseph rises to become second in command in Egypt through a series of remarkable events. When a famine strikes the region, Joseph's brothers come to Egypt seeking food, only to find Joseph in a position of power. Instead of taking revenge, Joseph saves his family, transforming their evil actions into something good. In the final chapter, Joseph reflects on the overarching message of the book. You intended it for evil, but God intended it for good, to save many lives. These words summarize Genesis's core theme. Despite humanity's repeated failures and choices for evil, God continually works to turn those actions into good. This promise of restoration, rooted in Abraham's family, is the foundation for the rest of the Bible's story. Genesis sets the stage, but leaves unanswered questions. How will God use Abraham's family to restore humanity to the garden? These questions are addressed in the rest of the Bible, continuing the story of God's plan for redemption. This concludes the book of Genesis, offering both a powerful message of hope and a foundation for the biblical narrative that follows. Genesis sets the stage for God's plan to restore humanity, but the story is just getting started. In our next video, we'll dive into the book of Exodus, where we'll uncover the incredible story of deliverance, God's covenant with his people, and his presence among them. Don't miss this powerful continuation. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're ready when it arrives. God bless you.